The fashion world of the 1990s glowed with a kind of magic that now feels almost untouchable. Magazine covers were cultural events, supermodels were treated like royalty, and the industry thrived on the dream that beauty could transform lives. Among the new faces emerging into this glittering sphere was a girl who seemed to embody the essence of youth itself, Krissy Taylor. Blonde, blue-eyed, radiant with a natural sweetness. She was the younger sister of supermodel Niki Taylor, and together the two were poised to become one of the most enchanting duos fashion had ever seen. Yet, Krissy's story was not one of long-lived stardom. Hers was a narrative cut short, a life that ended so suddenly and so mysteriously that it left an entire industry shaken. She was only 17, an age when most are just beginning to discover who they are. Yet she was already being immortalized in glossy spreads and hailed as one of modeling's brightest young hopes. Then, without warning, everything stopped. To understand why Krissy's story still resonates today, nearly 3 decades later, is to explore the uneasy balance between glamour and fragility. She was not a scandal-ridden celebrity, nor a supermodel burned out by years in the spotlight. She was a teenager, a daughter, a sister, a girl with dreams. But in her sudden passing, she became something larger, a symbol of fashion's hidden shadows, a reminder that even the most luminous faces can conceal silent struggles, and a haunting question mark over the pressures placed upon young women in the pursuit of beauty. Her death was officially ruled as the result of a rare heart condition, yet whispers of other causes, rumors of eating disorders, speculation about industry demands, quickly overshadowed the facts. The truth may never be fully agreed upon, and perhaps that is what gives her story its enduring mystery. Krissy Taylor did not live long enough to define her legacy herself. Instead, her legacy has been shaped by the questions her life and death left behind. What makes her tale so powerful is that she remains frozen in time. Unlike the great supermodels whose careers stretched over decades, Krissy will forever be remembered at 17, vibrant, innocent, poised at the edge of a future that was never realized. Every photo of her, every magazine cover, feels like a glimpse of potential lost, a reminder of how fragile the line is between promise and tragedy. As we revisit her journey, we are drawn not only into the bright lights of her short-lived success, but also into the shadows that followed. What truly happened to Krissy Taylor? Was she simply claimed by fate? Or was she another casualty of an industry that demanded too much, too soon? Her story is one of beauty and heartbreak, mystery and memory, a story that still haunts fashion's collective imagination. Tonight, we step back into that world. The sunshine of Florida suburbs where her journey began, the cameras that adored her, the bond with her sister that made her rise unique, and finally, the untimely end that turned her into a legend of what could have been. This is not just the story of a model, but of a life that reminds us of the fragility beneath every glamorous image. Krissy Taylor was born on May 15, 1978, in Pembroke Pines, Florida, into a family that seemed far removed from the flashing cameras and relentless pace of the fashion world. She grew up in a suburban home, surrounded by siblings, friends, in the simple joys of a childhood in the Sunshine State. Life was not extravagant. It was filled with the ordinary rhythms of school, neighborhood gatherings, and family routines. Yet within that seemingly ordinary setting, fate was quietly preparing an extraordinary path. Her older sister, Niki Taylor, was already carving out her place in the fashion industry when Krissy was still a young teenager. Niki's rise had been meteoric, capturing the attention of global brands and appearing on some of the most prestigious magazine covers of the early 1990s. Wherever Niki went, the spotlight followed, and soon it began to spill over onto her younger sister. For Krissy, the allure of modeling wasn't about chasing fame. Friends and family described her as gentle, shy at times, but with a quiet determination that revealed itself once she stepped in front of the camera. By the age of 13, she had signed with Ford Models, the very agency that was propelling her sister's career. It wasn't long before Krissy's face began appearing in print, not in high fashion campaigns, but in magazines that spoke directly to her generation. 17, Young and Modern, and other teen publications embraced her, casting her as the girl every teenager could relate to, the girl next door with a natural beauty that felt approachable yet aspirational. Her early shoots carried a certain innocence. She wasn't styled into dramatic personas or hidden behind layers of couture. She was celebrated for exactly what she was, a fresh, youthful presence. Her images conveyed optimism, her smile radiated sincerity, and her relatability made her a favorite among young readers. She wasn't competing with the enigmatic allure of Cindy Crawford or Naomi Campbell. She was carving out her own niche, becoming a role model for teenagers who saw in her a reflection of themselves. But even in those early days, there was a subtle weight to her journey. Being a teenage model meant balancing two worlds. On one hand, Krissy attended school, studied for exams, and spent time with her friends, like any other teenager in Florida. On the other, she was flying out for photo shoots, meeting professional expectations, and stepping into studios where every movement was scrutinized and every detail perfected. For a 17-year-old, the double life was both thrilling and demanding. Industry insiders who worked with Krissy often commented on her professionalism and sweetness. She didn't carry herself with the arrogance that sometimes came with fame. Instead, she approached her work with humility and gratitude. Photographers admired how she could look natural in front of the lens, capturing a kind of effortless charm. Stylists and editors noted her patience and willingness to learn. She had the makings of someone who could grow into much more than a teen sensation. Most importantly, she had her sister by her side. Niki and Krissy's bond became part of their public image, with the media often highlighting the Taylor sisters as a phenomenon, a pair of blonde, blue-eyed sisters who seemed destined to dominate fashion together. They appeared side by side in features, representing not only beauty but also the warmth of family, a quality that gave them an unusual authenticity in an industry known for its coldness. But as much as Krissy was beginning to shine, the cracks of pressure and foreshadowing were already present. The 1990s were notorious for rigid beauty standards, and although Krissy's image was celebrated, the whispers of expectation, stay thin, stay flawless, stay marketable, were always there, hovering like an invisible weight. No one could have guessed just how fragile her time in the spotlight would be. Krissy Taylor was no longer simply Niki's little sister. She was becoming her own name, her own star, with her own light. And yet, even as her star began to rise, it was already racing toward an end no one could predict. By the mid-1990s, Krissy Taylor was no longer just the girl next door from Florida. She was becoming a familiar face to thousands of teenagers across America. With her sister Niki commanding global attention on the covers of Vogue and walking runways in Paris and Milan, Krissy carved out her own space in the fashion ecosystem, speaking to a younger, more relatable audience. Her covers for 17 and Young and Modern were milestones that positioned her not just as Niki's sibling, but as a rising star in her own right. The appeal was immediate and magnetic. Krissy had a kind of beauty that resonated differently than the sculpted glamour dominating high fashion at the time. While supermodels like Claudia Schiffer and Naomi Campbell epitomized sophistication and power, Krissy embodied something gentler, a vision of freshness and innocence. She didn't intimidate her audience, she inspired them. Teenagers pinned her magazine spreads to their bedroom walls, aspiring not to a distant ideal, but to a version of themselves they felt was within reach. Behind the scenes, industry professionals were beginning to take serious notice. Agents and photographers noted her versatility, her ability to adapt in front of the lens while retaining that natural, effortless aura. Editors praised her patience and humility, qualities rare in an industry where even young models often developed hard edges to survive. There was a growing sense that Krissy had the potential to transition beyond youth-oriented publications, perhaps following Niki into the rarefied world of couture and international campaigns. The Taylor sisters became something of a phenomenon. Together, they represented not just beauty, but a story, a family bond unfolding under the brightest of lights. Their joint appearances captured public imagination. Two sisters with matching blonde hair, similar smiles, and intertwined destinies. Fashion magazines eagerly capitalized on this image, presenting them as a wholesome antidote to the often cynical, fast-moving world of glamour. For fans, they weren't just models, they were symbols of aspiration, embodying the idea that fame and success could still feel personal, even familial. But amid the spotlight, the cracks of strain were never far away. The fashion industry in the 1990s was unforgiving, demanding not only youth, but also endurance. The endless travel, the late-night calls, the pressure to maintain appearances, all of it weighed heavily, especially on someone still in high school. Friends noted that Krissy sometimes appeared exhausted, caught between the expectations of a professional career and the simple desire to live like any other teenager. Still, in photographs, none of this showed. Every cover, every editorial captured her radiance as if she were untouched by fatigue or pressure. The magic of her image was that it concealed the reality behind it. The glamour sparkled too brightly for audiences to imagine the shadows just out of frame. For Krissy, this period marked the pinnacle of her short-lived career. She was not yet a supermodel, not yet an international name, but she was on her way. The trajectory was clear, the opportunities expanding, the doors beginning to open wider. And yet, as history would prove, this was not the beginning of a long ascent, but the fleeting moment before everything changed. Her peak was both a triumph and a tragedy. It proved her potential, her unique charm, and the resonance of her image. But it also stands now as a reminder of just how much was lost. Every photograph from that time glows with promise that would remain forever unfulfilled. On the surface, Krissy Taylor seemed to have it all. She was young, beautiful, and on the cusp of a career that could have mirrored her sister's global success. To the outside world, she was the picture of health and happiness, a teenage model with a radiant smile and a future as bright as the Florida sun she grew up under. Yet beneath the polished veneer, small cracks were beginning to show. Cracks that, though barely visible at the time, now feel like subtle warnings that her story would not follow the path everyone imagined. The life of a teenage model was never as effortless as the photographs suggested. Krissy was still juggling high school classes, friendships, and the everyday pressures of adolescence while simultaneously navigating the demands of the fashion industry. She spent long hours on shoots, endured constant travel, and lived under the silent expectation of always looking flawless. For a 17-year-old, this dual existence carried a weight that few could see and even fewer could understand. Those who knew her described her as sweet and gentle, less outgoing than her sister Niki, but quietly determined. Yet even with her natural charm, there were moments when she seemed fatigued, stretched thin by the competing demands of schoolwork and modeling. Friends recalled how she sometimes appeared pale, tired, or distracted, though she rarely voiced complaints. In hindsight, those subtle signs feel haunting, like whispers of something hidden beneath her glowing exterior. The broader fashion world, too, was entering a period of reckoning. By the mid-1990s, the industry was under increasing scrutiny for its rigid beauty standards and the toll they took on young models. Stories of disordered eating, extreme dieting, and unhealthy pressures were becoming more frequent in the media. So when Krissy's life ended so suddenly, it seemed almost inevitable that speculation would swirl. Some insisted she had fallen victim to the same destructive forces that haunted so many of her peers. Others dismissed such claims, pointing instead to her natural vitality and the support of her family. These conflicting narratives reflected the unease surrounding the industry itself. The truth about Krissy's health remained obscured, but the willingness of the public to assume the worst said as much about the times as it did about her. She became, unfairly or not, a symbol of fashion's hidden dangers, its ability to celebrate beauty on the surface while concealing struggles just out of sight. There were also strange, fragmented recollections from those around her. Some remembered that she had complained of feeling unwell in the days leading up to her death. Others said she seemed quieter than usual, her normally bright energy dimmed. These details, vague and inconsistent, only added to the aura of mystery. Was it the exhaustion of balancing two lives? Was her body signaling an invisible problem no one recognized? Or were these just coincidences that took on greater meaning only after tragedy struck? For her sister Niki, the cracks behind the image were not abstract. She and Krissy were inseparable, sharing not only blood but also the peculiar experience of growing up in front of cameras. Their closeness made Krissy's struggles even harder to comprehend. To lose her sister so suddenly was not only a personal devastation, but also a stark reminder of how fragile the dream they shared truly was. On the morning of July 2, 1995, the Taylor household in Florida woke to a nightmare that would forever change their lives. Krissy Taylor, just 17 years old, collapsed suddenly at home and never regained consciousness. For a family that had watched her blossom from an ordinary girl into a rising star, the shock was indescribable. For the fashion world, it was unthinkable. How could someone so young, so seemingly healthy, be gone in an instant? News of her passing spread quickly, and with it came a storm of speculation. The timing, at the height of her budding career, fueled the public's hunger for answers. Almost immediately, rumors took hold. Many assumed that Krissy had become yet another casualty of the fashion industry's unforgiving standards. Whispers of eating disorders, extreme dieting, and exhaustion began to circulate. For a world already uneasy with the pressures on young women, her death seemed to fit too perfectly into the narrative. Yet the official explanation told a different story. An autopsy revealed that Krissy had suffered from arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia, a rare heart condition that disrupts the heart's rhythm and can cause sudden cardiac arrest. It was a disorder so hidden, so difficult to detect, that no one had known she carried it. In many ways, this finding absolved her of the accusations that had swirled in the immediate aftermath. She had not starved herself, nor had she succumbed to the visible pressures of the runway. Instead, her heart had failed her in silence. But if the official truth brought closure, it also left lingering doubts. Some continued to wonder if the relentless demands of her schedule had exacerbated an already fragile condition. Others questioned whether warning signs had been missed, whether faint complaints of fatigue or feeling unwell in her final weeks had been signals no one understood. The lack of clear answers allowed mystery to persist, transforming her death into more than a medical fact. It became an enduring question. Media coverage only deepened this ambiguity. Headlines balanced between reporting the rare heart condition and fueling speculation about fashion's darker side. To some, Krissy was a victim of fate, claimed by a genetic disorder no one could control. To others, she became a cautionary tale about the risks of thrusting young girls into an industry obsessed with perfection. The truth was complex, but the narrative that lingered in the public's imagination was one of fragility and loss. What made her passing so haunting was not only the suddenness, but also the silence around it. There were no scandals leading up to her final days, no dramatic unraveling. She had been at home, with her family, seemingly safe. Then, without warning, her life ended. Unlike other high-profile tragedies, Krissy's death was not about excess or controversy. It was about the quiet, devastating unpredictability of life itself. Her funeral drew family, friends, and colleagues who mourned not just the loss of a model,
but the loss of a girl who had barely begun to live. For her sister Niki, the devastation was immeasurable. They had shared everything: dreams, ambitions, and the unique experience of growing up in the spotlight. In losing Krissy, Niki lost more than a sister. She lost a piece of herself. Even now, nearly 30 decades later, the mystery of Krissy Taylor's death remains part of her story. Officially, it was a rare heart condition. Unofficially, it became entwined with broader questions about the toll of beauty, the pressures of youth, and the fragility of life. The answers may remain contested, but one fact is undeniable. A promising life was cut short, leaving behind not resolution, but haunting memory.
The loss of Krissy Taylor reverberated far beyond the walls of her family home in Florida. For those closest to her, the grief was intimate and devastating. For her sister, Niki Taylor, it was a heartbreak that no career triumph could ever mend. The two had been inseparable, not just as siblings, but as partners in a shared dream, stepping into the spotlight together and giving each other strength in a world that could be both dazzling and ruthless. In the years that followed, Niki often spoke of Krissy with a quiet, lingering sadness. Every runway walk, every magazine cover, every achievement she celebrated alone carried with it the absence of the sister who should have been beside her. For the fashion industry, Krissy's death became a sobering reminder of the vulnerability of its youngest faces. She was not the first young model to die unexpectedly, nor would she be the last, but the suddenness of her passing made her story particularly haunting. Unlike tragedies marred by scandal, Krissy's death was wrapped in innocence. There were no tales of excess or public downfall, only the image of a 17-year-old who seemed to embody health and vitality until her heart betrayed her. This contrast, the illusion of perfection shattered by an unseen fragility, captivated and unsettled the public in equal measure. Her passing sparked broader conversations about the welfare of models, especially teenagers. Though her cause of death was linked to a rare heart condition, the speed with which rumors of disordered eating and extreme dieting took hold revealed how deeply the public associated fashion with hidden dangers. In the years that followed, agencies, families, and fans alike became more aware of the pressures young women faced when entering the industry. While no rule or policy could undo what had happened, Krissy's story added weight to the growing call for better safeguards, better health screenings, and more realistic standards of beauty. Yet beyond the lessons and the industry debates, Krissy's legacy endures in a more personal way through the photographs and memories she left behind. Every cover she graced, every editorial she posed for, now carries an added poignancy. Her images radiate innocence, youth, and optimism, but they also remind us of what was lost, the campaigns she never starred in, the runways she never walked, the future that was never realized. In a sense, Krissy became immortal, forever frozen at 17, untouched by time and untainted by scandal. For fans, she remains a bittersweet icon, a vision of possibility that never had the chance to unfold. For her family, she is remembered not as a model, but as a daughter and a sister whose laughter once filled their home. To Niki Taylor, her absence was a reminder that behind every glamorous photograph lies something far more real: the fragile bonds of family, the fleeting nature of life, and the scars that even success cannot heal. Today, nearly 30 decades after her passing, Krissy's name still surfaces whenever discussions turn to the darker undercurrents of fashion. She has become a symbol, not of failure, but of fragility. Her story is invoked when people question the cost of beauty, when they ask what it means to thrust young lives into the spotlight, when they reflect on the human vulnerability beneath the glossy covers. Krissy Taylor's legacy is not of scandal, but of remembrance. She is a reminder that glamour and tragedy often walk side by side, that even the brightest smiles can conceal hidden battles, and that sometimes the most haunting stories are those that end before they can truly begin. The story of Krissy Taylor lingers not because of decades of fame, but because of how abruptly it ended, leaving the world suspended between promise and loss. At just 17, she was still on the edge of discovery, still learning who she was, and yet the fashion industry had already placed her image on glossy pages and elevated her as a symbol of youthful beauty. Her life was brief, her career still in its infancy, but that brevity is what makes her story unforgettable. Unlike some icons whose legacies are shaped by scandal or controversy, Krissy's memory is marked by innocence. She did not burn out in the spotlight. Instead, she was taken before the light could fully shine. Every photograph of her feels like a fragment of possibility, a glimpse of what might have been, a reminder of the life and career she was never given the chance to build. In those images, she is forever 17, smiling, vibrant, poised on the threshold of a future no one could have imagined would be so short. Her untimely passing forces us to reflect on the precarious balance between glamour and fragility. The official explanation, a rare heart condition, was a truth that few could have predicted. Yet the persistence of rumors and speculation speaks to the unease the world feels when confronted with such sudden loss. Some believed she was a victim of the industry's relentless pressures. Others trusted the medical conclusion, and still others chose to see her as a symbol of fate's unpredictability. The truth remains a space between certainty and mystery, leaving us to wonder whether her end was written in her body alone or whether it also revealed something deeper about the culture she inhabited. For her sister Niki, the absence is not abstract, but personal, etched into every triumph that followed. The image of two sisters rising together in the fashion world was broken in an instant, leaving one to carry both the glory and the grief. For her family, Krissy was never just a model. She was the laughter at the dinner table, the younger sibling whose dreams had only just begun to unfold. And for us, as observers decades later, Krissy Taylor's story endures as a haunting reminder of how fragile life can be. She teaches us that beauty, no matter how radiant, is never immune to the unexpected. She reveals the cost of perfection in an industry that thrives on appearances, while also reminding us that behind every image lies a human soul, vulnerable, fleeting, and real. As we close her story, we are left with questions that cannot be fully answered. Was Krissy Taylor's death purely a twist of fate, or was it also a reflection of an industry that demanded too much from someone too young? Was she destined to remain a symbol of innocence lost, or could her life have unfolded into a legacy equal to her sister's? The answers may never come, but perhaps that is why her memory endures, because mystery has a way of keeping the past alive. Krissy Taylor's light was brief, but it was bright. Her story is not only one of tragedy, but of remembrance. And though her time on Earth was fleeting, her image, her innocence, and her enigma continue to live on, etched forever in the history of fashion's most haunting tales. If you found her story moving, consider subscribing for more untold legacies, because behind every glamorous face lies a story that deserves to be remembered.